need special marker paper, mainly because the marker paper has a special coating, which prevents the ink from spreading, and the color doesn't lose its brightness. Regular paper doesn't have these properties. It absorbs marker strongly, and they run out faster. What kinds of paper are there? There are two, thick and thin. Thick double-sided. Thick paper can sometimes be used on both sides. I use thin paper because it makes it easier to transfer a drawing. If I need to make several color options, this is very convenient. For our lessons, it's important to use thin matte paper. There is a thin glossy paper, but I don't recommend using it, as colors smudge on it and often gets muddy. I use Reflex. This is German paper, a good alternative to French canson. It costs around $10. So we have chosen the paper. It's thin and matte. Now we need to understand which side to draw on. How to understand which one to choose. When you take a sheet, make a mark in the corner and see how quickly it dries. On the reverse side, the marker will take longer to dry and be more glossy. When on the correct side, the marker is absorbed faster and does not shine. Now about markers. Nowadays, there is a price for every budget. The marker has two tips, thick and thin. There are also markers with a brush, but we don't need them for now. So here are markers that I use. The first one is a touch marker. They cost about $5, perfect for beginning. I usually buy these in two shades. For example, I take this blue one and pair it with one that's a little lighter or darker, but of the same tone. It's easier to make smooth and deep color gradation with two markers. The next brand is MOTIKA, an American marker. They mix very well, so you don't need to buy a pair to create gradation. They are sold in a set of 10 and cost about $30. I like the color sets, but there are some difficulties with the gray ones. They are too dark. And the third one is COPIC. These are Japanese markers for professional sketches. They cost around $9 or $10. They are a large variety of colors. You can choose any of these brands, but I recommend that when you are choosing gray colors, you buy COPIC markers. Now about color. When choosing the color of marker, don't buy a dark one. We usually use several layers when shading in our drawings. So if you use a color that is too dark, the whole drawings becomes dark. Also, don't use a color that is too light or transparent, such as yellow. This is because it's difficult to darken it. For example, when using these touch markers, green and blue, with the following numbers, will work well. Now let's talk about gray markers. There are never enough gray markers, especially if you like to paint a metal texture. Ideally, you should choose 3 tones, very light, medium and dark. You'll need a white pencil. It's needed to correct uneven places in the filling and give a soft glow. It's very important to use a dry pencil. Remember, it must be dry, as an oily one can be used for blending. I use this one, a Durand pastel dry pencil. The white pen. The naughtiest thing that exists. I use this one. Next is a liner. I have a few of them. I advise you to take 2 liners, a thicker 0.8 mm and a thinner 0.1 mm. Alternatively, you can use a 2-in-1 liner if you can find one. Here is me using it to draw a thin line, and here is me using it to draw a thick line, so it's very convenient. Then we have a ball pen. It's also often used for sketching. A very cool thing that can create thin or thick lines, depending on the amount of pressure you apply. But it's only good for drafts, because markers smudge it. There are also a couple of tips. I recommend using an automatic pencil with a lead 0.5 or 0.7. Firstly, because it's thin, and secondly, it doesn't need to be sharpened. An eraser is also an important element. I usually have 2 of them. A thin one. I cut it off with a knife or sharpen it up, and it's very convenient to touch up some thin places. A sponge or a kneaded eraser is a rubber sponge that cleans up the entire drawing. Really useful thing. Well, in general, that's all. And now we can start drawing.